can we talk about Overwatch 2's ranking system for a moment? And really, any matchmaking system in general. Tell me if this scenario is familiar. You log on one night. You only have time for a few games because you have school or you have work in the morning. You have other commitments. So you can play maybe 4 or 5 games. You play them all in one night and it's terrible. You lose them all. You're just not on your game and it feels bad. Your teammates are crap. You're getting stomped in most of them. And afterwards you log off and you feel, what a waste of a night. That was awful. I could have done anything else and I would have been more satisfied and more fulfilled. So you go online and you Google something like Elo Hell or the grind in matchmaking in Overwatch 2 or how can I rank up when all my teammates are bad? And you see the same responses. It's always the same. It's people saying it works over a long period of time. Yeah, you might get some stinkers. You might get a bad teammate or two. But if you're a good player, you will be better than everyone else in the bad rank that you're in. And you will rise because it's quote-unquote fundamentally unfair. If you're to use Overwatch 2's terminology, a gold or a platinum level player and you're playing in low bronze, so you're right down at the bottom, you will make the game unfair. So you'll land so many shots that you'll imbalance the game and even though you have bad teammates, you'll raise them all up and you'll win matches and you'll eventually rise out of the tier that you believe that you don't belong in into the tier that you do belong in. So you're a reasonable person. You read those comments and you go, actually, you know what? That makes sense. I still believe that I'm a gold or a platinum level player, but maybe I just wasn't on it tonight. Another night will be different. I'll land my shots. I'll play better. And I am a better player, so I will rise out of the tier that I'm in, the bad tier. So next night then you go on, or whenever you go on again, and you play, and let's say you do rise a bit. Say you are playing well and you rise a bit and then you get to another level. Maybe you get out of bronze and you get into silver and it's the same again. It's just tough, man. It's just some nights are really good. Some nights you get 5 or 6 wins in a row and you'll only play like 6 games. You win them all. Some nights you'll lose 70, 80% of them. Kind of just varies. The reason that's happening is because you're now at the ranking that you should be at. And it feels bad, doesn't it? Like it doesn't feel great. Even though these people online were right that you got out of bronze and now you're in silver, it still feels a bit crap. Some nights you'll lose 3 or 4 games in a row. Some nights you'll win 3 or 4 games in a row. But the nights that you lose feel way worse than the nights that you win feel better. This is because this is what matchmaking, ranked matchmaking, and all these multiplayer games is trying to do, right? It's trying to put you in your place. It's trying to find the right place for you. And if everything worked perfectly, you would log on to a game full of equally skilled players. Every other player on your team and on the enemy's team would be exactly as skilled as you are. That sounds logically fair, doesn't it? When you think about it like that, that seems like a good place to get to. But it's not. When you log on and you play against people that are always as equally skilled as you, then it's really just a flip of the coin. It depends on how well you're playing that night. It depends on how well your teammates are playing that night. And a 50% win record, now I know I'm using a theoretical example here, but let's just say the matchmaking has gotten it perfect. A 50% win record means you're losing 1 in every 2 games. And that doesn't feel great. So you might say to me, okay, well, hold on. I can improve though, right? You know, I might get into silver tier, but there's still room for me to improve. I can watch videos online of guides, and there are a lot of them online. I can watch very good streamers play the character that I'm good at playing, or I can just play a lot. And I will keep rising and rising because I'm going to get better and better. Okay, that sounds good, but here's the issue. Everybody else is also doing the same thing. Okay, the idea that you and you alone are going to get better by continually playing the game and everybody else is going to stay the same is a fallacy. Everybody else is going to rise, and it's just dependent on how quickly you rise. How much better are you at getting better at the game than everybody else? And I like to think of this tier, and I call it the gamer tier. And it's a mid-level tier that tends to capture these types of players. So again, let's use Overwatch 2 as an example, because it's popular right now. You see, you have your bronze and your silver. I think the gamer tier is like high silver, low gold, or maybe even mid gold if we're being generous. And what the gamer tier does is it captures all those players who play to get better. Right, so you have bronze, and the people that remain in bronze are, just the people that log on and they don't really think about trying to get better that much, or they're very new and they will rise or whatever. And then you have your silver, which is like that, but just to a lesser extent. People are slightly better. Gold, I think, is then when you are looking at guides online. You're trying to get better at specific heroes. Certain matchup. But then it is very, very difficult then to rise out of the gamer tier, because everybody then is trying to do the same thing, right? They're all looking at guides. They're all trying to get better at the heroes. Some of them are going on to, lobbies that are just there to improve your aim. And in order to get out of the gamer tier, you then need to be better at improving than everybody else who is trying to improve. And that is a very, very difficult thing to do. That is all we're familiar with right now. And that there's this thing in games where the very, very high skilled players get to play a different game to everybody else. Okay? They get to play games that matter. They get to play games outside of just grinding ELO. They get to play competitive games. They get to play games where everybody's watching them. Even if you're not an Overwatch League player or a professional Dota 2 player and you're just a very, very good player, people will watch your games. It transcends this grind then. Okay, you have games that matter, and then let's not even talk about the professional scene where it's a tournament, you're playing for money, you're playing for fame and awards. These are all games that take place outside the matchmaking. And you might say to me, okay, yeah, well, duh. I mean, that's obvious. These players are very, very good. Therefore, they get to do things outside of the ranked ladder. They get to play competitive games because we watch them. That's fair. But I would disagree with that. And I want to use an analogy here. I want to look at another game that has a huge, huge population of people that play it and a massive range of skill. It's football. Or for you American listeners, soccer. A ton of different people play football, okay? You have the mega skilled players who play, in the leagues across the world where they get a ton of people watching them. They're multi-millionaires. Okay, we all know about them. I want to put them to the side. I want to talk here about the relatively bad players. Physical sports have developed this way of playing where relatively bad players can play in relatively important matches. So what do I mean by that? Well, say you're a football player in Ireland, and in terms of the grand scale of things, Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Kylian Mbappe, you are terrible compared to them, right? Obviously, you're terrible compared to them, but you're relatively good in your own little town, okay? And you play for your town. Let's say you play for a town, Shady Grove FC, okay? And Shady Grove FC is in a local league, and the local league has a number of towns in it. Now you're a relatively bad player, but you're playing matches every week that are important. You have now something to aim for that's no longer just a grind. You have competitions. You can succeed at different levels. The idea of a physical sports player grinding this ELO, that you just turn up and then you just play 6 matches in a row and afterwards you have this number beside you, is ridiculous, right? That sounds stupid. Okay, but that's what we've gotten so used to in video games. But in football, I can join my local team and all of a sudden now, I can score a winning goal in the 90th minute that gets us 3 points. I can get my team promoted. And when I say I'm a bad player, right? This is what you have to understand. This is achievable for relatively bad players because you're put with other relatively bad players. All of a sudden, competitions are there. You can achieve medals. You can achieve trophies. You can achieve fame. Granted, at a local level, a very small level, but it's fame nonetheless. I used to play rugby in college, and we would play every Wednesday. And after Wednesday, we'd all go to the pub. That day and that night, we would talk about the things that we did in that game. Oh, Johnny, that try that you scored is unbelievable. Oh my God, Rich, that tackle was savage. Brilliant tackle, right? We're all bad players, relatively, but we're all getting something from it. There's no grind anymore. right? It's important. We had an opportunity to win trophies and to gain medals. So you might say to me, okay, well, that's sports. It's not video games, okay? We have it in esports, but you need to be really good. And okay, I would disagree with that. I would say if we got some sort of multiplayer game that actually was able to harness relatively bad players into relatively bad teams and gave them competitions in the similar style that we do for very good players, I think that game could do very, very well. But it's a far stretch from where we are now. I understand that. Multiplayer games, though, used to have something similar, or at least that did some of the same things that my analogy with sports kind of used to give you. There's a game called Legends of Might and Magic, which was released in, I believe, the early 2000s, could be late 90s. Okay, it was a terrible game. It was best way I can describe it is fantasy Counter-Strike. Basically, all the rules of Counter-Strike, but instead of AK-47s, you had fire wands. You get the gist. You can Google it if you want. That was a tiny game. I picked it up because I think I was like 10 years old, and I pointed at the box on the shelf to my dad, and I saw like a cool fantasy warrior looking lady. And I thought it was a cool fantasy game. I had no idea it was a shooter. I'd never really played shooters. Brought it home, started playing it, got addicted to it, and got very good at it. The thing that made Legends of Might and Magic so cool was it was a tiny game with a tiny population. And because of that, everybody knew each other, or sort of knew each other. You would log into a server and you would see the same people. If somebody logged in, you would know their skill level when they log in. You'd be like, oh, XX Slayer XX has logged in. Okay, this server is going to get a bit tougher now because that guy's a good player. And you could develop a reputation because the population was so small. And then you had stuff like, you had clans, for example, and clans would kind of like, go and look at different lobbies, watch games, and recruit people to be in their clan. And then you had clan reputations. And that's when it got very cool. So, like, I'm not sure how young you are listening to this, but sometimes when you played, there was no like actual functionality to create a clan or a guild, right? All it was is basically you got a message and you were like, hey, do you want to be in our clan, or do you want to try out to be in our clan? And if you got in, all you did was you just like typed the clan initials in the beginning of your name. That was it, right? And that now made you a member of that clan. And I remember very vividly so I got very good at this game. Now, I'm not boasting here. It was a small population. It's not that difficult to get good in, but I got good in it. And there's a clan called AD. I actually can't remember what AD stands for. But it was known as one of the top clans in Legends of Might and Magic, and I got recruited to it. And it was that experience where, now that you had AD before your name, you were a big wig, okay? You were a big shot. When an AD player logged into a server, you knew the server now meant business. And that was so empowering and so validating. And remember, I was a relatively bad player in shooters, right? But all of a sudden, I had a reputation. Okay, can you take that analogy and imagine Overwatch 2? How many players play Overwatch 2? How many players have a reputation in Overwatch 2? It's a fraction of the percentage, right? I wouldn't even say 1% of the players have a reputation. Even at your ELO, specifically, your bronze tiers, your silver tiers, how often do you see the same player? How often do you even register names anymore? You don't. You just move on to the next game. You forget everybody. Unless, they're particularly toxic. That's kind of it, really. And so you might say, okay, well, Legends of Might and Magic is a tiny, tiny game, so it's not really a fair comparison, because Overwatch 2 is so much bigger, so much more difficult to develop reputation, and that's a fair comment. However, I'll counter that by talking about Team Fortress 2, which at the time was one of the most popular shooters. That was a pretty big game, okay? And still, you were able to get a reputation. And the way they did that was they used servers. What a lot of players used to do is they would log into the same server every night because it was so active. The game was so active that server would be populated most of the day, and certainly every night. And all of a sudden now, even though the game is huge, right? So the game had like a couple 100,000 players. I'm not even sure what Team Fortress 2 had. Might have had a million. Even though it had a massive population, you were now going down to that small level. Like a sports team, you were going to your own little mini league, which was your server. And because the servers brought this like population down, so you would have maybe 50, 100 people that would play on the same server regularly, again, you would get a reputation. You'd log in and it'd be like, oh, there's Mary. Mary is a savage engineer. We got to watch out if Mary switches to engineer. Mary has a reputation. If Mary went and played professional Team Fortress 2, she'd be absolutely shat on. Right? She'd be dumpstered. But within our server, Mary was great. And Mary had a reputation. So it is possible to do that and to have that feeling. And like, when we played Team Fortress 2 in that server, none of us were ever Googling how to get better with bad teammates. You know, it just wasn't a thing. None of us were looking to grind. We just logged into the server, and I guess to an extent, when I think about it, we were grinding, but we were grinding our reputation. And if you got better, you got a better reputation. But even sometimes, all it would take is doing something really cool in a clutch game. And I bet you've done that, you, Mr. Bronze level player. I bet you had one moment where you did a really sick play in a bronze tier match that won you the game, and it was a really good play. Like, even a pro would be like, okay, that was pretty good. Bronze level players have those maybe 1 in a million moments, and it's forgotten about instantly. Okay, you might have won the match, congratulations, you got plus 20 SR rating for it, but it's instantly forgotten, even by you after a few weeks. But in the server-based games in Team Fortress 2, I still remember amazing plays that were done by people, and that was like, Jesus, what was that? That's like over 10 years ago. So it is possible to do that. I'm not saying that matchmaking is bad. There are clearly benefits of matchmaking. The problem with server-based stuff is sometimes the server is empty. And that got particularly bad when the game started waning in popularity. Like in Team Fortress 2, after, a number of years, the server I always used to go to, it started dwindling. And then you had to go to other servers. And then the reputation thing gets muddied, because once you leave to another server, you're a nobody, right? It's so clearly put on the individual server that you're on. And, if I want to log in, it's 20 to 12 on a Thursday morning now. If I want to log into Overwatch, I can instantly play a game. And I can instantly play a game full of people that are around my skill level. Well, I say instantly, haha, Overwatch 2 Q times. But a lot of server-based games, you can't do that, right? Especially towards, after a year of Team Fortress 2, the servers were still very popular, but they were popular in the evening when everybody was home from work and everybody could play. If I wanted to play Team Fortress 2 in that server at 2012 on a Thursday morning, I'd be out of luck. So there are clearly benefits. And then obviously you also have, the unfairness of it. Matchmaking is supposed to make your games fair. And sometimes server-based games don't do that. Now, I would say that good servers will police balance, and they would be like, oh, Mary, you go on the weaker team because you're class. You carry as an engineer. But some servers don't do that. So it definitely has imbalances. But my point here isn't that let's all go back to server-based multiplayer gaming. My point is, when ELO feels bad, it's valid that you feel bad grinding. Even if you're improving slightly, even if you're in gold, and you just feel, I just can't get to platinum. I'm a good player, but I just can't get there. And people online would be like, oh, but listen, gold is great, well done. But it feels hollow, doesn't it? And that's the problem with matchmaking. Matchmaking is cold, it's efficient, and it can leave you feeling that you really haven't achieved anything. Maybe multiplayer games don't have to be like that. Maybe you can score the winning goal for Shady Groves FC and win your shitty tournament and get a medal and get local fame. And I'm looking forward to a multiplayer game that can deliver that experience. Okay, guys, thanks for listening. See ya.